Welcome to another edition of Coffee with Tea. I'm going to give you this really, really quickly. I was in the shower this morning and I've been thinking about some things that young people have been sharing with me. And I've been witnessing and watching in our young people around low self esteem and their desire to get a validation stamp from people who aren't even valid. Our young people at the heart of so many things that we're watching, mental health issues, their desire to fit in and making poor choices in a response to desiring to fit in. It occurred to me that at the root of all of that is low self esteem. Did you know that low self esteem is a generational curse? Did you know that many people pass it on from generation to generation to generation? In my own family, I watched how the generational curse of low self esteem has impacted every single generation, starting with my grandmother, whose rearing and upbringing was so tragic, largely because her mother had been a slave during the slavery era, and she passed on some of the toxicity that had been a part of her trauma childhood to her daughter, who was my grandmother, who then passed it on to my mother, who lived and battled, as awesome as she was, a life of insecurity and low self-esteem. And I watched how that got passed on inadvertently to me and my sister and my brother, and how it manifested differently in all of us. Mine is because I've always been voluptuous. Most of my life I have battled not just insecurity, but extreme anxiety. And it took me years to understand that it was tied to my low self esteem. And when I feel anxiety manifesting and welling up in me, I am clear that it comes from a place of my old insecurities and low self-esteem creeping back in. No matter how much therapy I've been through, and no matter how many times I remind myself how amazing I am because I'm made in the image of God, there's still a soundtrack playing in my mind that tells me that I'm really not enough. That's where imposter syndrome comes from. All that stuff that you hear people talk about is really the manifestation of low self-esteem, which is a generational curse. So today I wanted to come on and say to anybody who's listening, especially our young people, you are not valid because you're an honor roll student. You're not valid because of the decisions that you make or don't make. You're not valid because your parents say you are. You're not valid because your friends accept you as though you are. You are valid because Almighty God says that you are. He didn't bring you to the earth as enough. He brought you as more than enough, because that which is in you mm, is a powerful thing. That's why the enemy spends so much time trying to convince us who we are and who we are not, because he understands if we fully understood who God created us to be, it would change the atmosphere. So when you see people acting out of a place of insecurity, recognize that it really is not about you. It's about them looking for validation that they can never get externally. I don't care how many awards you get. I don't care how many degrees you get. I don't care how many people wake up and say how amazing you are, until you believe it inside of you and you connect it to the God man that's inside of you. It will always be a facade. And it has taken me years to get to the place where I believed that there is something amazing inside of me. But it doesn't come from a place of arrogance. It comes from a place of submission to God, that which is His, which is me. I have submitted to God the T that didn't love herself. And I've allowed God to love on me in a way that has allowed me to start to love myself and to teach young people how to love themselves unconditionally and without apology. And people think that that's an arrogant statement. It is a statement of self worth. And self worth and arrogance are not the same thing. Self worth reflects a confidence that arrogance doesn't understand. Arrogance is the overstatement of your own self importance, but confidence is the accurate assessment of your own self worth. It is okay to feel good about who you are, because the Father says that you are all that, because the King of the universe said that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Who are you to argue with God about your worth? But I be daggone if I ain't gonna argue with God. I'm not gonna sit up and banter and debate my worth with the enemy of my soul, who always finds a way to bring in the old tape in my head that tells me who I am. And so every day I do affirmations, reminding myself who God says that I am. He says that I am the head and not the tail. He says that I am a lender and not a borrower. God says who I am. So, devil, for all the young people's minds that you think that you're going to corrupt with low self-esteem, it's broken. It's broken. And no matter what I see in the next generation in my own family, I am not moved by what I see. I am moved by what God said. I'm the amazing T Street. Now, I promise you, I didn't intend for this talk to go into a God session. But how can you have validation if you don't get it from the validator? And the only person whose validation stamp you need is that of Almighty God. Because humans in our capacity will always find a way to decide if they're going to validate you or not. The good news is your worth is not contingent upon their recognition. It is contingent upon what God has already ordained. I'm the amazing T Street. Can I tell you? You don't need anyone else's stamp of validation. You are already valid. Trust that. Have an amazing day.